Rain beat hard against the glass that afternoon, blurring the world outside the Marble Oak, a restaurant where money whispered louder than storms. Inside, the air shimmered with the smell of roasted duck and quiet power. People didn't just eat here, they displayed their status, their elegance, their superiority. Then the door opened, and a hush swept through the room. Every fork froze midair. Every whisper died. The kind of silence that only arrives when something, or someone, important enters. Mrs. Eleanor Delaney, the deaf grandmother of the city's most powerful millionaire. Her arrival wasn't just a visit. It was an event. She moved slowly, guided by her assistant, dressed in soft gray silk that seemed to hum with wealth. Her silver hair was pinned in a perfect twist, her pearl earrings glimmering under the chandelier's golden light. Yet despite her grace, there was something fragile about her, the stillness in her eyes, the way she scanned faces without sound. The manager noticed her first. His posture straightened so fast, it almost cracked his spine. "That's her," he whispered, panic rising in his chest. "Everyone, focus." His eyes darted across the room and landed on Amara, the only black waitress on duty. His jaw clenched. "You. Table 12. Don't mess this up." Amara froze. The other servers glanced at her, smirking behind polite smiles. They whispered, "Why her? She'll make us look bad." The humiliation sat heavy in Amara's stomach. But she nodded quietly, wiping her damp palms against her apron. She had worked here 2 years, long enough to know what those stares meant, not doubt in her skill, but disbelief in her right to stand where she stood. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her sneakers soft against the marble floor. As she neared the table, she saw the old woman's face up close, delicate, kind, yet distant. Amara didn't speak at first. Instead, she raised her hands slowly and began to sign. "Good afternoon. My name is Amara. I'll be your server today." Her movements were careful, graceful, filled with warmth. Mrs. Delaney's cloudy eyes widened. A smile bloomed across her face, small and trembling, but real. For the first time that day, she looked seen. The assistant beside her gasped softly. "You sign," he whispered. Amara nodded. "A little," she said, her voice gentle. "My mother. She lost her hearing years ago. I learned so I could still talk to her." In that small moment, something shifted. The old woman's lips curved into a laugh, soft, silent, but powerful enough to draw attention from nearby tables. Amara smiled back, shy but proud. Yet before the warmth could settle, another sound sliced through the air. Sharp footsteps, polished shoes striking marble with authority. A tall man entered. Broad shoulders, slicked back hair, a suit that looked like it could buy the restaurant itself. Richard Delaney, Jr. He froze when he saw Amara standing beside his grandmother. His expression hardened. "What's this?" he snapped. "Who allowed this?" The manager rushed over, stammering. "Sir, she's serving Mrs. Delaney today." Richard's jaw tightened. "She doesn't understand her," he said coldly. "Get someone who speaks properly." The words hit like a slap. The dining room went silent again. Every guest turned, pretending not to stare while doing exactly that. Amara's throat tightened. Her heart pounded. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor, but something inside her, something her mother had given her, held her still. She lifted her chin. Her fingers began to move again, calm and confident. Mrs. Delaney's eyes followed her hands. Then the old woman laughed again, louder this time, a breathy sound that turned heads. The kind of laughter that disarms cruelty. Amara didn't flinch. She finished signing, then whispered softly, "She understands me just fine." Richard's nostrils flared. "Excuse me." But Mrs. Delaney placed her wrinkled hand over Amara's and gave a nod, as if crowning her with silent approval. The manager stood frozen, unsure which side to take, power or truth. For the next few minutes, time stretched thin. Richard tried to argue, but his grandmother ignored him. Her eyes stayed on Amara, tracing every motion, every word spoken through air. The rest of the restaurant returned to life, but something had changed. Every server, every customer, they all sensed it. The air had a new tension, the kind that arrives when pride meets grace and doesn't know how to react. Amara continued her work with quiet precision, moving like music between tables. But inside, her hands shook. She knew what that moment had meant, how easily her job could vanish with one rich man's disapproval. Yet when she saw the old woman smile, the fear faded. For a brief, fragile second, it felt like her mother was there too, whispering, "Hold your head high, baby. You were made for moments like this." She cleared the table, replaced napkins, refilled the teacup, and as she did, she noticed something in the grandmother's eyes, something like gratitude, mixed with longing. It wasn't just that she understood sign language. It was the way she saw her. Not as help. Not as decoration. But as a person. Richard stood a few feet away, still watching, his jaw tight with irritation. He whispered something to the manager, probably another complaint, but for once, the manager didn't move. Maybe even he could feel the power of what was happening at that table. Two women, one black, one white, one who couldn't speak, one who had been silenced her whole life in other ways, communicating in perfect, wordless harmony. When Amara brought the main course, she noticed Mrs. Delaney's trembling fingers trying to sign something back. Her hands moved clumsily, uncertain. Amara leaned closer, smiling, helping her form each word until they both started laughing quietly, like two children sharing a secret language. It was a moment so pure, so human, that even the rich man's arrogance couldn't touch it. But pride never likes being ignored. Richard's voice cut through again, colder now. "Enough of this circus. My grandmother doesn't need pity." His tone dripped venom. Amara froze, her heart sinking. She expected the old woman to stay silent, to retreat into that world of rich politeness. But instead, Mrs. Delaney placed her hand on Amara's cheek, smiled, and then turned to her grandson. Her lips formed one word. "Stop." Richard's mouth fell open. He had never seen her look so firm, so alive. The restaurant went still once more, the kind of silence that carries meaning. Amara blinked back tears, stepped back, and whispered, "Thank you, ma'am." When the manager tried to move her away from the table, Mrs. Delaney raised her hand. One simple gesture. He froze. That hand, fragile yet commanding, spoke louder than any millionaire's voice. The message was clear: let her stay. As Amara stood there, the rain outside grew heavier, streaking the windows like tears. But inside the marble oak, a different storm had begun, one that had nothing to do with weather. It was a storm of pride and prejudice, of silence and truth, ready to tear apart everything people thought they knew about respect. Amara didn't know it yet, but that single act of kindness, that quiet defiance, would unravel a secret buried for decades, and change every life in that room forever. The next evening, the rain had stopped, but the air still carried its memory, heavy, damp, expectant. Inside the marble oak, tension lingered like perfume after a fight. The night before had changed something in the air. People whispered in the corners about the black waitress who dared to talk to the millionaire's grandmother. Some laughed. Some admired. But for Amara, it wasn't a story, it was survival. She stood at the prep counter, straightening her apron, praying her hands wouldn't shake again. The manager approached, his voice low and sharp. "She's back. Same table. This time, don't make a scene. Be invisible." His words stung, but Amara only nodded. She'd learned long ago that the louder someone tried to shrink her, the calmer she needed to be. Mrs. Delaney arrived, dressed in soft lavender this time, her eyes bright and curious. She looked around until she found Amara and smiled, the kind of smile that said, "I remember you." But sitting across from her was Richard again, his phone in one hand, impatience in the other. He didn't look up when Amara approached. "We'll start with wine," he said flatly, still scrolling. "A bottle of the 62 Bordeaux. Do you even know where that is?" Amara nodded. "Yes, sir." He glanced up, smirking. "Of course you do." His tone was soaked in mockery. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to Mrs. Delaney and began to sign softly, her hands flowing like water. "It's good to see you again. How are you feeling today?" The old woman's face lit up, her hands moving in slow, gentle replies. Amara smiled as she interpreted. "She says she's glad to be here." Richard rolled his eyes. "You really think she understands all that? She's old, not He stopped mid-sentence when his grandmother gave him a glare sharp enough to slice glass. Amara bit the inside of her cheek to keep from smiling. Dinner began like a test she hadn't studied for. Every move she made was under Richard's microscope. Every pour of water, every placement of a plate, every gesture was watched, not for service, but for failure. He whispered things to the manager, letting them slip just loud enough for nearby guests to hear. She's only here because of quotas. The restaurant wants to look diverse. A few laughed quietly, the sound of cruelty disguised as sophistication. Amara kept her eyes down. Her chest ached, but she focused on her task. Serve perfectly. Stay calm. Don't give them what they want. Still, the words sliced deep. Each whisper reminded her of the nights her mother worked double shifts just to pay rent, how people talked to her like she was invisible. When she brought the appetizers, Richard leaned back and said, "Tell me, Amara, do you even know what foie gras is?" His tone was half question, half insult. The whole table waited for her to stumble. But she looked up, her voice steady. "It's duck liver, sir. Pan-seared with port wine reduction." His eyebrow twitched. She continued, "It's served best with something sweet, perhaps the quince chutney you ordered." For a moment, silence. Then Mrs. Delaney's shoulders began to shake with laughter. Amara couldn't help but smile too. Richard's smirk faded. He reached for his glass of red wine, swirling it lazily. "Careful," he muttered, his voice darkening. "Confidence doesn't suit everyone." Then, with a deliberate flick of his wrist, the glass tipped. The deep red liquid spilled across the white tablecloth, dripping down onto Amara's shoes. The sound of the splash echoed through the restaurant. Forks paused mid-air. All eyes turned again, just like the night before. Richard leaned back, feigning annoyance. "Oh dear," he said coldly. "Clean it up." Amara stared at the stain. The crimson streak spread across the floor like blood, dark and accusing. For a moment, her throat locked. Her pride screamed to walk away. Her job whispered to obey. The world seemed to hold its breath. Then she did something no one expected. Amara didn't kneel. She took a napkin, crouched slightly, and placed it gently on top of the spill, not to clean it, but to cover it. Then she looked at him and said softly, "Respect should never be wiped off the floor." You could feel the air shift. Mrs. Delaney's hand froze midair, trembling, eyes wide with pride and heartbreak. The manager stepped forward, panic in his face. "Amara." But the grandmother stopped him with a single raised hand. For a few long seconds, no one spoke. The restaurant, once filled with whispers of money, now held only silence. The kind of silence that humbles even the rich. Richard said nothing. His lips parted, but no words came. The old woman looked at Amara, her eyes glistening, and signed, "You are strong. You remind me of someone I once knew." Amara swallowed hard, blinking back tears. She nodded in gratitude and continued serving as if nothing had happened. Every motion afterward was slower, steadier, more deliberate, like each movement was a statement. "You cannot break me." Mrs. Delaney refused to let anyone else serve her after that. She tapped the table when she wanted more tea, signing softly to Amara, asking about her family, her mother, her life. They laughed together, two women from opposite worlds, meeting in a place that was supposed to divide them. The assistant tried to follow their conversation but couldn't. To him, their language looked like music he couldn't hear. Richard sat silently for a while, watching, anger and confusion flickering in his eyes. It was the first time he'd ever seen his grandmother smile that way, warm, alive, almost childlike. It unnerved him. By dessert, Mrs. Delaney was signing faster, her old fingers moving with surprising grace. The manager stood at a distance, clueless to their exchange, while the other servers whispered again, but this time not in mockery. In awe. As Amara served the final dish, a lemon tart drizzled with raspberry syrup, the old woman reached out and squeezed her hand. Her lips moved slowly. "Thank you." Amara smiled, signing back, "My pleasure, ma'am." What no one knew, not Richard, not the manager, not a single person watching that table, was that the old woman wasn't just thanking her for service. She was thanking her for something much deeper. For dignity. For peace. For reminding her of a time, long ago, when kindness saved her life. Outside, Thunder rolled faintly in the distance. Inside, the lights shimmered against silverware and crystal glasses, and somewhere in that hum of wealth, two souls had found each other, one speaking through silence, the other through grace. Amara didn't know it yet, but this dinner wasn't about food, or manners, or class. It was the beginning of an unraveling, a buried truth waiting to rise, carried in the trembling hands of a woman who had lived too long in silence. The next morning, the same quiet rhythm filled the cafe, the smell of roasted beans, soft jazz from an old speaker, and a silence that felt heavier than usual. The grandmother returned, escorted gently by her son, the same arrogant man who had mocked Maya earlier that week. He looked impatient, his expensive watch glinting like a warning sign. But the old woman's eyes were soft, searching the room until they found Maya. Maya approached with her usual warmth. The grandmother smiled, tapped her chest twice, and gestured something. Maya froze for a moment, recognizing the signs. With trembling hands, she responded, perfectly fluent in sign language. The cafe fell quiet as the two began to speak. Without words. Her co-workers stared, whispering. The millionaire frowned, confused by the silent exchange between his mother and the woman he had humiliated. Then came the moment that changed everything. The grandmother's face lit up. She gestured rapidly, tears welling in her eyes. Maya signed something back, her lips trembling. The millionaire stepped closer, demanding to know what was happening. The grandmother turned to him and began signing angrily, her hands sharp and fast. His translator, standing behind, hesitated before translating aloud. She says, "This girl saved her once. Years ago. During the flood. She was the only one who helped her." The cafe froze. The millionaire blinked in disbelief. He looked from Maya to his mother, realization dawning like thunder. His mother's hands continued, trembling, emotional, describing how a young waitress had carried her through the rising water, speaking softly even when she couldn't hear the panic around her. She had never known the girl's name, until now. Silence filled the air. The same waitress he'd insulted was the one who had once saved his mother's life. Maya stood there quietly, tears glistening but no pride in her posture, only humility. The power in the room shifted. For the first time, the millionaire looked small. The cafe that once echoed with gossip now felt sacredly still. The millionaire, once towering in pride, stood frozen before the truth. His mother, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks, reached out and took Maya's hands in hers, trembling yet full of warmth. She signed something gently, and the translator whispered, "She says, you gave her life when the world turned away. You are her angel." The millionaire swallowed hard, guilt clawing up his throat. Every word he had spat at Maya replayed in his mind, every glance of disdain, every cruel smirk. He had mocked her silence, her grace, her humility, unaware she had once risked her life to save the only woman he truly loved. The weight of shame pressed his shoulders down until he could no longer stand tall. He stepped forward, eyes glistening, and whispered hoarsely, "I'm sorry." But words felt too cheap, too small to repair what arrogance had broken. Maya looked at him, not with vengeance, but with quiet forgiveness. "It's all right," she said softly. "We all hear the world in different ways." The grandmother smiled through her tears, signing again, "Some people listen with their hearts, not their ears." In that moment, the millionaire broke. He hugged Maya, the same waitress he once humiliated, and the cafe around them erupted in gentle applause. The noise was faint, but for the first time, everyone seemed to feel something deeper than sound. They felt the power of grace. Days later, the cafe door opened again. Only this time, the millionaire walked in wearing no suit, no arrogance. Just humility. He handed Maya a small envelope. Inside was a letter of gratitude and a donation for hearing-impaired children, in her name. Tears filled her eyes. She looked up and smiled. Sometimes the loudest voices aren't heard, they're felt. Moral: dignity needs no wealth. Kindness needs no noise. And sometimes, the quietest souls teach the world how to truly listen.